Let's pause our marriage. She said it flat, right between two bites of cold Chinese takeout. The chopsticks slipped from my hand. The word pause hit harder than a punch, like she was hitting pause on me, the man who built this home, this life, this routine she was already bored of. I stared across the table, at the woman I thought I knew. No tears, no anger, just that calm corporate tone she used in meetings. 3 weeks in Tokyo, she said. Space to think. Space. That word people use when they want freedom without guilt, when they want to test new waters while keeping one foot on the dock. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I smiled. Okay. Her eyes twitched. Confusion, fear, maybe both, because she just pressed pause. And I was about to press play on a life without her. If you've ever felt that moment when calm becomes power, hit subscribe. This isn't a story about losing someone. 2 days before the flight, the kitchen felt louder than usual. The hum of the fridge, the clink of plates, the way the faucet hissed when I rinsed her bowl. I kept moving, stacking takeout boxes, wiping soy sauce rings, pretending this was just another Wednesday in Ohio. She hovered, watching me like I might crack. "Are you okay with this?" she asked, voice careful, like stepping on ice. I dried my hands on a dish towel, looked at her, and simply nodded. No lecture, no debate, just a nod. It said more than a paragraph ever could. I'm not chasing. I'm not fighting. I'm not begging for a place at my own table. The silence sat between us, long, heavy, honest. I loaded the last plate into the dishwasher and shut it with a soft click that sounded like a line being drawn. She waited for me to fill the gap. I didn't. The quiet did the talking, and the quiet wasn't on her side. That night, the house split into lanes. In the bedroom, her suitcase lay open like a bright blue mouth, swallowing outfits and chargers and little bottles labeled travel. In the living room, the TV talked about baseball, but nobody was listening. I walked that hallway between rooms 3 times, a narrow strip of carpet that felt like a border crossing. She stood at the doorway once, hand on the frame, wanting to say something she couldn't make sound noble. I could see the calculation. Keep control, keep terms, keep me orbiting. The clock on the wall clicked through a minute that felt like 10. I muted the TV and waited, making room for the truth. She swallowed it instead. "I should finish packing," she said, stepping backward into the bedroom glow. That was the moment the ground shifted. Not a slam, not a scream, just a retreat. And it told me everything. When someone won't speak the truth, silence does it for them. Dawn came like a clean blade. I brewed coffee in the dim and poured hers into the stainless travel mug she likes, lid tightened, sleeve straight. She rolled her suitcases to the door at 5:58, right on time, like catching a flight could fix a marriage. We stood there in sweatshirt air while a Honda idled at the curb. "Text when you land," I said, handing her the mug. My voice sounded normal. That surprised me. She nodded, searching my face for cracks. None offered. The driver popped the trunk. The wheels thumped down the steps. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that felt like a book finding its place on the shelf. I leaned against the wood and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. The house held still. A cardinal chirped outside. Somewhere, a neighbor's sprinklers ticked on. It was the first quiet that didn't feel empty. It felt like room. And room can change a man. Room makes you honest. I grabbed a pen and a yellow legal pad and wrote at the top, "Things to do while marriage is on pause." I turned on the kind of music she hates, guitars with gravel, and ordered a pepperoni at 10 a.m. because, why not? I pay the bills here too. I stood in the kitchen with a slice on a paper plate and wrote the first line like a dare. Number 1. Decide if I even want to press play again. The words looked back at me, black and simple, like a door I could walk through. I added a few more. Clean the garage, call the dentist, buy decent towels. Boring, grown man stuff that somehow felt like reclaiming square inches of my life. Between songs, I heard the house breathing with me, not against me. I put the pen down and stared at that first line. I knew the answer already. Still, it felt good to let the sentence say it out loud. By afternoon, the sun slid onto the back porch, the kind of Ohio light that makes a cheap beer taste like a good decision. I called Trevor. We hadn't really talked in a while. Rachel never liked how direct he could be. He showed up in a denim jacket, sat in the old chair that still creaks, and listened without interrupting. I told him about the pause, Tokyo, the corporate tone, the smile I gave back. He didn't flinch. He took a pull, set the bottle on the rail, and said, "She's testing the waters, man, looking for permission without the guilt, keeping you as the safety net." It landed in my chest like a hammer finding the nail it was made for. Not mean, just true. And truth has a way of turning down the volume on your fear. I nodded, slow, feeling something tall rebuild in my spine. "So what now?" he asked. I looked at the yard I mow, the porch I fixed. "Now," I said, "I choose me." Choosing me sounded good on the porch. It needed teeth the next morning. I opened my calendar, doctor's appointment, oil change, that reminder to replace the water heater filter, and added one more line. Call Caldwell. Not to burn it all down, not yet. Just to know where the exits are before the building catches fire. I found his number through a friend of a friend, the kind of name guys pass along when they say, "He's solid." His assistant offered a slot Thursday at 10 a.m. I took it, then stared at the screen like it was a clock counting backward from 21 days. 3 weeks, long enough to pretend nothing's happening, or to quietly build a spine. I poured coffee, looked around the kitchen I pay for, and heard my father's voice in my head. Hope for the best, get ready for the worst. The climax was simple and steady. I wasn't choosing divorce. I was choosing information. And information is a kind of courage. Thursday came with that lawyer office smell, leather, paper, a hint of old coffee. Caldwell shook my hand like a man who's seen the end of 100 marriages and still believes in fairness. He listened without interrupting, writing on a yellow legal pad while I told him about the pause, Tokyo, the smile, the silence. Then he asked one question I didn't see coming. "Do you think she wants answers or permission?" He let it hang. "Permission to do what she wants without being the bad guy," he added softly. The room felt smaller. He walked me through assets, accounts, rights, plain talk, no scare tactics. "If you both decide to fix it, good. You've lost nothing but a consultation fee," he said. "If not, you won't be blindsided." The climax landed in one clean line I could feel in my ribs. People use pretty words to dodge responsibility. I left understanding the difference, and how much it had cost me to ignore it. Outside, noon sun bounced off car hoods and made me squint like a kid after a matinee. I had a slim folder under my arm, contacts, checklists, a few if-then notes that felt more like seatbelts than weapons. I sat in the truck, hands on the wheel, and let the quiet settle. It wasn't relief exactly. It was alignment. That night, as I scrolled through my photos to send Trevor the cutting board, a new image popped up in the shared album we'd forgotten to disable. Tokyo skyline, 2 glasses of wine, and a man's wristwatch I didn't recognize, half-framed beside hers. No caption, no explanation, just time-stamped truth. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds, then hit remove from shared album. Didn't save it, didn't forward it, didn't need to. You can't lose what's already walked away. You can only stop guarding the door. I turned off the phone and picked up a chisel. Metal against wood was louder than regret, and it made something real. Like the tires had finally been rotated, and the pull to the left was gone. On the way home, I skipped the freeway, took the slower road past the Little League fields, the diner with the burned coffee, the hardware store where the bell over the door never quite stops ringing. Ordinary places that remind a man who he is. I said it out loud at a red light, just to hear it. I'm not preparing for divorce. I'm preparing for self-respect. As I pulled into my driveway, the phone buzzed. Tokyo number. I almost didn't answer. Her voice came through too smooth, rehearsed. "I saw your name on a call log. Caldwell Law? Are you divorcing me?" I could hear laughter and glasses clinking in the background. For a moment, I said nothing. The silence stretched until even the line felt nervous. "I met with him," I said, "to understand the rules of a game I didn't start." She went quiet, then soft. "Mark, it's not what you think." That old phrase. The one people use when they've already decided what they'll do next. I'm not thinking, I said. I'm learning. When the call ended, I didn't feel anger, just confirmation. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It just stops pretending to whisper. I drove straight to the old gym, the one with iron plates scarred from years of being dropped, chalk dust hanging in the air like a sermon. No eucalyptus towels, no smoothies named after tropical birds, just metal, breath, and effort. I wrapped my hands, lay back on the bench, and stared at the ceiling tile with the crack shaped like Ohio. First set felt heavier than it should. Second set found a groove. By the third, my elbows stopped negotiating and my chest did the work. The bar came down, tap, and rose under me like a fact I could prove. A guy in his 50s nodded from the next bench, the silent language men speak when they recognize a fight that isn't about the weight. The climax wasn't the number on the plates. It was the moment the bar path turned straight. My life had felt crooked for years. Here, under steel, I could finally see the line, and it was mine to hold. After the shower, my phone buzzed on the locker's metal shelf. Miss you. 2 words, clean as a blade. 6 months ago, they would have sent me into a panic, counting minutes, drafting speeches, begging the sky for a sign. I sat on the bench, water still dripping from my hair, and typed, "Glad you made it safe. Rest up." Polite, true, nothing more. The typing bubbles appeared, vanished, appeared again, like a fishing bobber teasing the surface. The old me would have dove in, trying to hook meaning from ripples. I put the phone face down and laced my shoes instead. Across the room, a man dried his hands and nodded at me like we'd both learned the same lesson the hard way. The climax lived in that small, stubborn choice. I didn't feed the silence with my heart. I let it stay hungry. Walking out into the late afternoon light, I felt the story tilt my way. And somewhere in Tokyo, the pause began to feel real. Walking out of the gym, I drove home with that steady, quiet spine and opened the laptop on the kitchen table where this all started. Numbers don't lie, and they don't play games. I pulled up my checking, her checking, and the joint account we use for the boring stuff: rent, utilities, groceries. Then the stack of bills: internet, electric, the card we both put gas on. I wasn't snooping. I was mapping the ground I stand on. Line by line, it looked simpler than the noise in my head. Most of what's mine is mine. Most of what's hers is hers. The joint account felt like the last shared drawer in a dresser we've both been outgrowing. I made notes: due dates, balances, subscriptions we don't need. A couple of small auto charges I'd let slide because arguments weren't worth the $10. I canceled them with 2 clicks. The climax arrived in a calm sentence I said out loud. It's pretty separate. Clean, really. Clarity, finally, with a paper trail. Clarity carried into the evening until her name lit my phone. Video call. I answered in the living room. She appeared in a hotel room bathed in cool, careful light. "Why are you so calm?" she asked, like composure was an insult. I let the question sit, the way a ref lets the crowd quiet before the free throw. "You asked for space," I said, voice even. "I'm respecting your boundaries." She blinked, not expecting the mirror to turn. "Do you even care about this marriage?" There it was, the trap disguised as concern. If I cry, I'm weak. If I don't, I'm cold. "I care about being in a marriage where both people want to be there," I said. "If you're figuring that out, figure it out." The silence on her end wasn't empty. It was crowded with every answer she didn't want to say. The climax was a role reversal. I gave her exactly what she asked for, and it wasn't what she wanted. When the call ended, the house didn't feel like a test anymore. It felt like mine. I dimmed the lamp, put on a slow lo-fi track, and let the day climb off my shoulders. No tiptoeing, no rehearsing tomorrow's apology just to keep the peace. I brushed my teeth without listening for footsteps or tone shifts down the hall. It's funny what you notice when control leaves the room. The hum of the AC, the slow blink of the modem, your own breath finding a rhythm that doesn't ask permission. I lay down and stared at the ceiling fan, counting blades until the thoughts stopped sprinting. Sleep reached me the way it used to when I was 22 and bone-tired from real work. Quick, deep, clean. The climax was quiet but absolute. I realized I wasn't afraid of her moods anymore. Whatever weather she brought home, I didn't have to stand in it. That kind of peace isn't loud. It just turns the lights off. Morning brought coffee and a different kind of plan. I drove to the community center, a brick box that smells like floor wax and second chances, and found the flyer I'd noticed a dozen times. Intro to woodworking. Nothing fancy. Tuesday and Thursday nights. Saw safety, sanding, finishing. I paid the fee at a counter where a retired guy slid a clipboard toward me. Name? He asked, pen tapping. I wrote, Mark Peterson, and felt it land like a signature on my own life. In the shop, the air tasted like cedar and effort. A table saw a word behind plexiglass. Someone's project, a simple cutting board, weighted on a rack, edges square, purpose honest. I ran a hand over a scrap of walnut, the grain dark and stubborn, and pictured something useful taking shape under it. The climax wasn't the class itself. It was the decision to show up for something that didn't need her approval. Ink on a sign-up sheet, sure, but that ink belonged to me. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a photo, a rooftop view, city lights, a glass of something expensive catching the sunset. Wish you could see this, she wrote. I looked at the picture, at the tiny self-portrait baked into it. Look what I have, look where I am, and felt nothing I had to fix. I sent a thumbs up and slid the phone face down. 10 minutes later, that's your response? I tied my shoes for a jog and let the question sit there, unanswered, like a doorbell I didn't owe. Before, I would have filled the gap with apologies, poems, and plans. Now, I let the gap do its job. On the sidewalk, an old neighbor waved from his mailbox. Evening, Mark? Evening, I said, and meant it. The climax was control by subtraction. I didn't feed her need for drama, and the silence started working for me. Somewhere above a foreign skyline, the pause began to taste like what it really was. Distance she asked for, delivered. Letting the silence work for me made room for something better, lunch that actually tasted like lunch. Trevor picked the diner with the cracked vinyl booths and the grill that seasons everything with 20 years of stories. We ordered burgers the size of softballs, swapped old college memories, and laughed the kind of laugh that shakes rust off your ribs. Between bites, he asked how I was really doing. I told him about the rooftop photo, the thumbs up, the way drama dissolves when you stop feeding it sugar. He didn't high-five me, he just nodded, like a mechanic hearing an engine start clean. You realize, he said, you've always been an option in her world. I wiped my hands, looked at the window grease-sketched with afternoon light, and felt the sentence rise from somewhere solid. I'm an option, and I choose me. It sounded backward and honest at the same time. That was the paradox. I wasn't winning by chasing. I was winning by walking away with my dignity. That evening, the shop smelled like sawdust and second chances. I was learning to square an edge when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Missed call. Then another. Then another. 2 voicemails stacked on top. Tiny red dots asking for attention. The old me would have stripped off the goggles, stepped into the hallway, and poured himself into the noise. I kept my hands on the walnut. Push, check, sand. The instructor talked about grain direction. I listened with both ears. Break came 10 minutes later. I wiped my palms, glanced at the screen, and sent one line. In class. No apology, no essay, just the truth at room temperature. I didn't press play on the voicemails. I let them sit like unopened mail. Back at the table saw, the board glided the way it's supposed to when you stop forcing it. That was the reveal. Not every ringing phone is a fire. Some are just tests, and you don't owe every test your panic. The test turned into a call I answered on my terms. After class, in my truck, engine off, windows down to the Ohio evening. You're distant, she said, breath tight, like I'd broken some unwritten rule. I thought of Caldwell's pen on the legal pad, of the gym bar path finally straight, of the board I was making with my own hands. I'm respecting what you asked for, I said. Space. She sighed like the word had betrayed her. Do you even care? The line crackled. The trap set itself. I care about being in a marriage where both of us want to be there, I answered. If you're using this time to figure that out, use it. The silence stretched, then snapped. So that's it? I looked at the porch light on the house across the street. the way it made a little island in the dark. "That's me drawing a line," I said. "Values, not volume." The climax wasn't louder, it was truer. The next morning I met the Iron early. Carter, square shoulders, crew cut, the quiet gravity of a man who's seen deserts and dawn patrols, spotted me without being asked. We worked in rhythms, lift, breathe, rack, no chit-chat, just the language of sweat. Between sets, he tapped the bench with 2 fingers. "You ready for that conversation?" he asked, not curious, prepared. I knew which one he meant, the real one, the one where a man says what he stands for without asking permission. I wiped chalk off my palms and nodded. He gave one of those small smiles that says good, then added, "Discipline isn't punishment, it's protection." Mentor talk, no sermons. We loaded another plate. The bar felt honest, heavy but fair. With every rep, I felt the story tighten, the excuses drain out, the spine I'd been building find its use. The climax wasn't a pep talk, it was a mirror. Carter held it up without judgment. I finally liked who was looking back. By the time Friday night rolled around, my life had a pulse I recognized. Calendar steady, lift in the morning, work that actually got done, real meals eaten at a table I wasn't apologizing for. I slept when I was tired and woke up before the alarm because my brain wasn't running defense against someone else's weather. After dinner, I sat on the back porch with a clean glass of water and the kind of sunset you only notice when you're not checking your phone every 4 minutes. A lawnmower droned 3 houses down. A kid bounced a basketball on cracked asphalt. Ordinary America. It felt good. I let the weeks stack up in my head and said the quiet part out loud. The air's better when you're gone. That's the hard truth. It didn't feel cruel. It felt accurate, like a level bubble finally centered. The climax landed soft but deep. Week 1 ended without drama, and the peace didn't feel like an accident. It felt earned. Peace doesn't last long when someone needs control. By Saturday morning, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Long stories from Tokyo poured in. Who she met, what she ate, the view from a conference room 30 floors up. Then the questions landed fast. What are you doing today? Who with? Why didn't you reply last night? The tone wasn't curious, it was inventory. I let each message sit a beat, breathing between pings the way you do when a smoke alarm keeps chirping at 2 a.m. Then I answered like a grown man paying his own bills. Short, factual, not unkind. Gym, errands. All good here. No emojis, no essays, no bait taken. The bubbles danced, disappeared, returned. Her side of the rope tugging for drama. I put the phone on the counter and went back to my day. The climax was restraint. I didn't swing. I held the line. And somewhere across the ocean, the unanswered tension started writing its own next scene. That tension shook loose old memories I'd labeled normal. They surfaced like receipts you find when you finally clean the glove box. The time Trevor invited me to fish and she said my friends were a bad influence. The photography class I dropped because Thursdays were our time, even though Thursdays usually meant her scrolling while I watched the game on mute. The health zone rule that turned a cold beer in my own kitchen into a small act of rebellion. None of it was a felony. All of it added up. Little edits to who I was until the man in the mirror needed permission to breathe. I sat on the couch and let the pattern come into focus. Kind smile, closed fist. That was the climax. Not anger, recognition. You can't fix what you refuse to name. I finally named it without shouting. Control that calls itself care is still control, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Sunday afternoon, I went back to the shop and sketched a cutting board on scrap paper. Rounded corners, handhold groove, nothing fancy. Walnut called to me, dark and honest, with a grain that doesn't apologize for direction. I traced the outline, clamped the blank, and felt the saw hum through my palms. Pass, breathe, check. The edges squared up, the surface turned from rough to ready under sandpaper that whispered instead of screamed. I wiped it with a little mineral oil and the wood came alive. Deep brown, quiet shine, lines like a topographic map of someplace worth hiking. I wasn't making art. I was making something that would stay because I built it too. The climax slid in like a truth I could touch. I put my hands on a thing that will outlast this argument. Maybe that's why it felt holy in a small way. In a world of moving targets, the board didn't move. It became what I asked it to become. That night she called again, voice softened at the edges, like she'd wrapped it in a blanket. "This time apart has been hard," she said. "Has it been hard for you?" The old script would have had me performing grief to prove love. I leaned against the counter and let the refrigerator hum fill the gap. "I'm managing," I said. She repeated it back, puzzled. Managing? She wanted adjectives, a confession, a storm to mop up. I gave her a weather report. "It means I'm doing what I need to do." Words matter. Caring doesn't mean collapsing on command, and communication isn't an invitation to be interrogated. The climax was a quiet redraw of the map. I defined my terms, not hers. "So you don't miss me?" she pressed. I took a breath. "I miss being in a marriage that feels good for both people. If you want that, use the time you asked for." The line went quiet. Sometimes definition is the sharpest blade. Monday, Trevor texted, "Got something." We met at the same diner, same cracked booth, same reliable coffee. He slid into the seat, looked me in the eye, and said, "Katie talked to Melissa. Your wife's spinning." "Not about love," he explained. "About control. Worried I was different. Worried I might be okay." The truth landed without theatrics, like a wrench finding the right bolt. I stirred my coffee and felt the pieces click. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing the version of me she could manage. "So?" Trevor asked. I nodded slowly, the kind of nod a man gives when a fog finally lifts. "She's more afraid of losing control than losing me." Saying it out loud made the room bigger. The climax wasn't revenge, it was clarity. When you understand what the other person is actually protecting, you stop tap dancing for their comfort. You walk, steady and straight, toward the life that doesn't need their permission. Clarity from that diner conversation followed me home, all the way to the bathroom mirror. I saw the faint grooves on my shoulders where stress used to ride me like a yoke, already softening. The purple half-moons under my eyes? Lighter. My posture? Not soldier stiff, just naturally straight, like my spine finally trusted me. I rolled my shoulders, breathed in the quiet, and realized I wasn't bracing for anyone's mood to come storming down the hallway. The sink light made an honest man of me, showing what sleep and a little self-respect can do in a week. I looked myself in the eyes, steady, not defiant, and waited for the old flinch that never came. There's a difference between acting strong and being settled. That morning, settled showed up. I wiped the mirror with a hand towel, traced the clean rectangle I'd made, and said it out loud so it would stick. "I like the man in this mirror." That was the image I chose to keep. Liking that man meant guarding him. So I opened my calendar and blocked the woodworking class. No tentative, just ink. I penciled in gym slots like appointments with my future and promised myself I'd treat them with the same respect I give a boss. When my phone buzzed during those windows, I didn't leap. I finished the set, I finished the cut. Then I responded in plain English, no guilt attached. It surprised me how fast the world didn't end when I didn't answer in 60 seconds. Groceries still got bought. Bills still got paid. The dog in the neighbor's yard still barked at the mailman right on time. The feeling grew by degrees, like a dimmer sliding up instead of a switch flipping. Boundaries aren't about punishing anyone. They're about protecting what you're building. I looked at the day I'd just kept intact and felt that quiet pride men know when a plan holds. The line I drew wasn't against her. It was around me. The reward for boundaries is often a test. Sunday night, my phone lit with a message that didn't ask. It announced, "I'm flying back Monday." No question mark. No, does that work? Just a landing. I stared at the screen, then at the folder from Caldwell sitting in my desk drawer like a fire extinguisher. Close, ready, unused. I slid it out, flipped the cover, and made sure the names, dates, and numbers were exactly where they should be. Not a threat, a checklist. I heard the clock in the hallway tick into a countdown. T-minus 48 hours. Could be a conversation. Could be a storm. Either way, I wouldn't be the man who waited at the window wringing his hands. I closed the folder, placed it neatly beside the cutting board I'd made, and felt the two truths breathe the same air. I can rebuild, and I can walk away clean. I said the line to the empty room, not for drama, for readiness. I'm ready. Readiness made Monday simple. I cleaned the house the way my dad taught me, top to bottom, left to right, because order settles a man's head. I vacuumed under the couch, tossed the dead batteries in the junk drawer, lined up the shoes by the door like they meant something again. In the shop, I sanded the cutting board to a satin that made the walnut glow, eased the edges until they felt honest in the hand. Then I laced up and ran the neighborhood loop, the one with a gradual hill that finds out if you've been lying to yourself. Back home, I showered, made coffee, and set the board on the table like a flag. None of it was for her. That's the paradox that finally made sense. I wasn't staging a scene. I was respecting my space. If she noticed, fine. If she didn't, it still mattered. The climax was quiet and solid. I didn't prepare to impress. I prepared to live, on purpose. At 3:15, tires rolled over the curb outside, and the doorbell rang with the politeness of a stranger. She stepped in with 2 hard-shell suitcases and a new haircut that said reset. Tokyo clung to her clothes. Ohio waited in the dust motes. We stood there in the foyer, same house, different weather. Her eyes did a quick inventory, the uncluttered shelves, the weights in the corner, the magazine about woodworking where fashion used to sit. The house looks different, she said, voice careful, like testing a floorboard. I met her gaze without explaining the transformation she could feel but not name. So do you, I answered, not as a compliment or a cut, just a mirror. She glanced at the cutting board on the coffee table, ran a finger along the oiled edge, and set it down like it might tell on us both. The air tightened, then held. That was the image I wanted. 2 people facing what they made. And me, steady in my own doorway. Her fingers found the cutting board like they'd been here before. She traced the handhold groove, the soft radius on the corner, then lifted it an inch off the table the way you test a thing for weight and truth. "You made this?" she asked, not accusing, curious in a way that arrived late. "Yeah," I said. She set it down carefully, as if a hard place in our story might bruise it. The walnut took the light and gave it back warm. I watched her watch it, and realized I wasn't hoping for praise. This wasn't a bouquet to win her over. It was a flag I planted in my own ground. For years I brought home things to fill her idea of us. This one had my name in the grain. The climax was simple and physical. The board didn't ask for permission to exist. It sat there, finished and useful, proof that I could make something solid in a life that had been soft around the edges. She sat across from me, the coffee table between us like a border crossing, the cutting board laid flat, neutral ground. "Do you not need me anymore?" she asked, hunting for a shape she could manage. I let the question breathe. Need is a leash word. It sounds romantic until it tightens. "I don't need," I said, steady. "I choose." The room held its breath. She blinked, as if I'd spoken a language she used for other people but never expected to hear from me. "Choose?" "Yeah," I said. 2 adults, 2 choices, no one dragging the other. The old script would have sprinted to comfort her, to sweeten the line until it lost its edge. This time, I let the edge stay honest. The climax lived in the swap. Love dragged into the light where it has to stand on its feet. Choosing doesn't erase feeling. It just refuses to be managed by it. On the table, the walnut didn't move. Neither did I. "This was just space," she said, reaching for the word like a shield. 3 weeks to think. Space is clean on paper, but I'd been doing translations all marriage long. "Space or a free pass?" I asked. The air sharpened. "I didn't do anything wrong," she shot back, and there it was. Accountability ducking behind vocabulary. "You don't need to confess anything to face what it means," I said. "You wanted freedom without being the bad guy. Pause sounds kinder than separate. It keeps me on the hook while you test the water." She flinched at the bluntness, not the volume. I wasn't shouting. I was naming. Her gaze slid to the board again, as if the wood might translate for her. The climax was recognition, not rage. Pretty language can hide a lot, until it doesn't. Once you see the trick, the card game gets quiet. If you want it out, I added, say out. If you want it in, act in. But pause isn't neutral, it's leverage. I can change, she said, the words soft at the edges, offering truce without terms. We can start over. The promise hung there like a sale sign you've walked past too many times. I thought of the trips I didn't take, the classes I didn't finish, the small yeses that became a long no to myself. Start over from what? I asked. From the part where I apologize for wanting a life that includes me. Her eyes flashed. The room felt smaller. That's not fair, she said. I was overwhelmed. And I carried it, I answered. No heat, just ledger lines. Every time I drew a small boundary, you called it distance. Every time you drew a big circle around yourself, you called it growth. The climax was the collision, no more soft focus. I'm not starting over at manipulation, I said. If there's a new start, it begins with truth, responsibility, and two people who don't need a pause button to speak plainly. The board stayed between us, straight, squared, finished. She swallowed hard, then tried one more angle. If you'd fallen apart, if you'd cried, wouldn't that mean you loved me? The question landed like bait on a hook. I let it sit in the water. If I'd fallen apart, I asked, would you respect me more or less? Her mouth opened, closed. Her eyes went glassy with calculations that finally had nowhere to land. Respect and control don't sleep in the same bed for long. Outside, a delivery truck idled, then moved on, the house breathing between sounds. I didn't rescue her from the answer. I didn't build a softer version for her to sign. I watched the truth do its quiet job. The climax arrived in what she couldn't say. Silence can be cruel. This one was clean. She looked at me like a person seeing the end of a road she thought would loop back. So what now? She whispered. I glanced at the board, at my hands. Now we decide, I said. And I already had. Then we decide, I said, and set the decision on the table. I reached into the desk drawer, pulled out the Caldwell folder, and placed it beside the cutting board like two exhibits in the same case. What I could build, and what I was prepared to end. No slam, no speech. Paper against wood, quiet as snow. She stared at the manila edge, at the neat tab with my name typed straight, then looked up for a storm that didn't come. You filed? She whispered. I shook my head once. No. I tapped the folder with a finger that didn't shake. But I'm ready. The room shrank to the width of that tabletop. She touched the board again, as if it could explain me to her. It did. I wasn't threatening. I was revealing. The climax lived in the stillness between objects, the useful thing I made and the necessary thing I might do. I left the folder where she could see it breathe. The folder wasn't a weapon. It was a map. I opened it and spoke in the plain language men use when they fix trucks and sign mortgages. Finances are simple, I said. Your accounts are yours. Mine are mine. The joint covers bills. We rent, not own. No kids. Clean lines. I slid a one-page summary forward. Balances, due dates, the handful of subscriptions we'd already canceled. No drama, no fuzz. If we rebuild, this clarity helps us, I added. If we end, it keeps us from bleeding. She watched my hands like I'd learned a new alphabet. I hadn't. I'd stopped pretending. This is fair, I said, not like a lawyer, but like a man who can look his neighbor in the eye after a deal. The climax was the relief that shows up when the fog lifts. Nothing hidden, nothing slippery, nothing to win by confusion. Fair isn't romantic, but it's sturdy, and sturdy is what survives the weather. Sturdy unnerved her more than shouting ever did. She exhaled hard, then played a card with a shaky hand. Melissa says you seem different, she said. Happier. The word tasted like a complaint. Is that why you flew home early? I asked, holding her gaze. Because you love me, or because you were losing control? She flinched like the chair had moved. That's not fair, she said, defaulting to the old siren. Fair, I repeated softly, letting the inventory from the last week answer for me. Boundaries kept, class attended, calls returned on my time. I'm not punishing you. I'm just not lurching when you pull a string. Her eyes went bright with that complicated mix: fear, pride, habit. I came back because I care, she insisted. Caring and control aren't twins, I said. Sometimes they're rivals. The climax landed without volume, values on the table, labels peeled off the jars. If love needs a leash, it's not love. It's management. Management has a mirror, and she tried to hand it to me. You're the one who shuts down, she said, finding her old footing. I didn't swallow it this time. That was you, I answered, calm as a level bubble. When I planned a fishing weekend with Trevor, you remember, you called it selfish for 3 days until I dropped it. Her mouth tightened. I kept going, not to win points, but to put pegs in the wall where the truth could hang. The photography class? I quit because Thursday was our time, and our time turned into you scrolling while I watched the game on mute. I nodded toward the kitchen. Beer in my own house was a health zone violation. No cussing, no sarcasm, just pictures from a life we both lived. I didn't shut down, I said. I bent until I felt breakable. The climax wasn't anger, it was inventory. Once counted, the past doesn't disappear. It just stops gaslighting you. She looked at the board. She looked at the folder. Then she looked at me, searching for the old switch she could flip. I didn't move. Breath in, breath out. No rescue, no threat. The house made its small sounds. The fridge cycling, the neighbor's car door thunking shut, the late afternoon pressing against the blinds. I let the moment stand without furniture. Negotiation needs noise. I gave it none. She tried one last ask with her eyes. I answered with a single word built like a noun: solid, undecorated, final. Done. It didn't slam. It settled. The syllable expanded into the room, touched the edges, and came back to me clean. She swallowed, nodded once the way people do when they recognize a line that won't move. The climax wasn't triumph. It was closure measured in air pressure. I set my hand on the walnut, oiled, finished, true, and felt my pulse steady to match it. Whatever came next would start from here. Done didn't explode. It settled, and that calm made her furious. You're destroying our marriage, she snapped, palm on the doorknob like it owed her loyalty. I didn't chase the volume. I let it rise on its own, the way a summer storm muscles over the neighborhood. Go ahead, I said, voice even. Tell whatever story you need to tell. Her eyes flashed. To Melissa? To everyone? That you quit? I shook my head. Tell it all. The truth will still be here when the noise runs out. She gripped the knob tighter, then yanked the door open like that could make the world agree with her. The screen door slapped and rattled, the kind of sound that used to yank an apology out of me. Not tonight. I stood there, breathing through the leftover adrenaline like a runner at the finish. The escalation peaked and passed, leaving only air and the hum of the fridge. Anger wants an echo. I gave it drywall. The house stayed standing. Quiet has a way of pointing to the next step. I walked to my desk, pulled the Caldwell card from the folder, and dialed. This is Mark Peterson, I said when the receptionist answered. I'm ready to file. She put me through. Caldwell's voice carried that steady courthouse calm. We set an appointment for Friday morning, 10 o'clock, sign and review. It felt like scheduling a root canal and a release at the same time. I wrote it on the calendar like any grown man writes the things he intends to keep. Block letters, no wiggle room, 3 days. Not a threat, not a dare, just a countdown that finally had a purpose. I set the phone down next to the cutting board, paper and wood sharing the same light, and felt my shoulders drop a notch. Decision doesn't have to shout. It shows up on time and brings a pen. The moment of confirmation hit like a clean click. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was moving. Movement invites pushback, and it arrived after midnight. Voicemail 1. Soft apology, the kind that floats on old pictures. Voicemail 2. Heat and blame, a tour through my alleged coldness. Voicemail 3. Bargaining. Let's not rush. Think of what we built. I lay in the dark and listened to each one like you listen to rain on a roof you finally trust. The old me would have called back at 12:17, voice cracking, offering new terms just to stop the spin. I didn't. I deleted them one by one, not cruel, clear. Phone face down, lamp off, breath steady. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. And that cliffhanger, the unanswered space, wasn't a tactic. It was the truth of a boundary held. Somewhere across town, words kept reaching for a door that wouldn't open on old keys. I rolled onto my side and found sleep without wrestling it. Not every message deserves a middle-of-the-night version of you. The right ones wait for morning. Friday came with coffee and an ironed shirt. Caldwell's office felt familiar now. Leather chairs, quiet hall, the gravity of paperwork. He slid the documents across the desk and walked me through each page like a coach calling plays. Petition, service, timelines, division we'd already outlined. I read every line. Then I signed. Steady hand, no dramatics. The notary stamp thumped like a small gavel. We shook on it, and he gave me the next steps in plain English. Walking out, I held the door for a stranger and caught my reflection in the glass. Same guy, lighter by a weight he couldn't name until he set it down. Outside, midday sun made the parking lot shimmer. I stood there a second and realized the tight band around my chest, years thick, had loosened. Not joy, not grief, relief, clean as a deep breath after the cast comes off. The release wasn't loud. It lived in the way my feet felt flat on the ground again. That was new. I took that new feeling to Trevor's place, where pizza grease and a ball game can cure most things that don't need a doctor. We argued calls like we were 25, laughed about a guy from college who still can't grill chicken without burning it, and let the ordinary do what it does best, make life livable. During a commercial, he gave me the look men give when they want the headline, not the novel. "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought. "Only that I didn't do it sooner," I said, and felt no sting in the truth. He nodded, took a bite, and clinked his bottle to mine without a speech. The TV got loud again. We let it. The climax wasn't fireworks. It was the return of simple things, cheering a clean three-pointer, reaching for another slice, not checking my phone to see which storm I owed next. Normal isn't boring when you've missed it. It's a win you taste between bites. The next day, the doorbell made that polite ding again, and Melissa walked in behind Rachel with flattened boxes and that friend face people wear at funerals and moves. I sat in the living room while they worked the bedroom, drawer by drawer, closet by closet, packing a version of our life into cardboard you can buy in 10-packs. Tape hissed, markers squeaked, hangers clacked. I didn't supervise. I didn't help. I let the room be the room and me be me. When they finished, Melissa carried the heavier boxes, because kindness is practical like that. Rachel stood in the doorway with one last tote, eyes touching everything and nothing. "This is really happening," she said. I nodded. "We're still married," I answered. "Just not for long." The paradox sat there, honest as weather. True today, not true tomorrow. She held my gaze like a person memorizing a house before the remodel. The climax wasn't a slam or a sigh. It was that crooked fact spoken straight, no tremble. When the door closed, the house didn't echo, it exhaled. The light came through the blinds at a different angle, catching dust that floated instead of swirling. No suitcase wheels on the wood, no hurried steps, no mood scouting, no temperature check of every room before I entered. I sat, not because I needed to recover, but because stillness felt like something worth noticing. The couch had space that wasn't a statement. The table held only what I'd put there. Outside, a lawnmower droned and then cut off. The quiet landed soft and deep in my chest, like lungs after a long swim touching air they trust. I stood, opened a window, and let the late afternoon breeze find the corners we hadn't aired out in years. The climax lived in the simplest math. More room equals more breath. And when a man can breathe, he can think. When he can think, he can choose. The house wasn't empty. It was finally sized right for one. Choice called from a familiar number. "Leg day tomorrow, 6 a.m., you in?" Carter doesn't text paragraphs. He texts appointments with your better self. I set the alarm and showed up when the sky was still the color of a bruise. The racks were busy with the same faces. Guys who don't need to introduce themselves because the plates announce who they are. Carter nodded me into the set. Down slow, up strong, bar steady. Between rounds, he didn't ask for updates. He handed me chalk. That's how men say, "I've got you," without making it a poem. A younger guy asked if he could work in. We made room. The cadence felt good. Shared effort, earned respect, zero drama. Somewhere between the last squat and the walk to the water fountain, it hit me. I had a tribe again, not a club to pose in, a crew that meets you at weight and will. The climax was belonging without negotiation. I didn't earn it by pleasing. I kept it by showing up. That afternoon, the woodworking instructor emailed, "Advanced class opens next month. Stool project, you ready?" I stared at the photo. A simple three-legged stool, clean joinery, nothing to hide behind. I replied yes before my old habit could ask who might approve. At the shop, he showed me the plan. Angles that make sense only when you measure twice and cut once like you mean it. I ran my hand over a fresh stack of walnut and beech, feeling the difference under my palm. One dark and stubborn, one pale and willing. He talked about splay and rake. I heard future and structure. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a next step that didn't require a speech, just effort tomorrow. The climax was the door that opens because you turn the knob, not because someone gifts you the key. Keep learning, keep building, keep making useful things that prove you're moving. The class didn't promise meaning. It promised work. And I've always done fine with work. Work met paperwork in a courtroom that was smaller than TV makes it look. She contested hard for 6 weeks, posturing, demands that didn't fit the math. Caldwell stayed calm. The judge read the lines that matter. No kids. Separate finances. Rental, not mortgage. The law doesn't care for theater when the facts are clean. The hearing took 20 minutes. Some questions, a couple of signatures, a stamp that sounded final. We walked out through different doors without drama, because drama needs an audience and the hallway was empty. I didn't check if she looked back. I didn't perform grief or victory. Outside, Columbus wore a regular afternoon, traffic making its long, familiar exhale down Broad Street. I stood on the steps and felt the chapter close the way a good book does. Satisfying, not loud. Countdown complete. The climax wasn't the decree, it was the quiet that followed, the way my shoulders settled like furniture finally set in the right room. On to the life that counts forward. Moving on doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a PayPal notification. I put 3 cutting boards on a simple website. No story, just measurements, wood type, and photos I took by the kitchen window when the light behaved. The first order came from a zip code 2 states over, then another from a neighbor who'd seen me carrying lumber. I boxed them careful, included a small note, "Handmade in Ohio, thank you," and used the money to buy better clamps and a sharper set of chisels. The math wouldn't impress anybody at a cocktail party, but that wasn't the point. The point was seeing sweat turn into something that people wanted and would use. That little profit walked with its chest out. It told a bigger truth. Progress doesn't need permission or applause. It just needs proof. The climax was simple. Small dollars, big dignity. I had a side business now, not because I chased a dream, but because I kept my hands moving. Keeping my hands moving made it easier to keep my head clear, and climbing with Carter did both at once. 4 evenings a week, we tied in at the gym where the walls tilt over you and the holds have names that sound like jokes. The first time I topped a route that had shut me down for a month, I slapped the finish and yelled without meaning to. Breath burning, forearms pumped, brain rinsed clean. Carter grinned from the ground and shouted, "Knew you had it." That's the thing about real friends. They loan you their faith until yours shows up. On the drive home with my hands still trembling, I realized the climb had nothing to do with plastic rocks. It was the picture my body needed. Plan, try, fail, adjust, finish. The climax was the click when a hard line goes and suddenly you're standing where fear said you couldn't. Mind quiet, heart steady, tomorrow ready. With the noise gone and the lungs full, I let friends set me up on a couple of dates. Coffee, not candlelight. Conversation, not audition. I didn't talk about the past like a wound. I talked about the present like a place I liked living in. I learned to notice green flags. Someone who shows up on time, laughs easy, pays for their own things without making it a scoreboard. When it didn't fit, I said so kindly and left it there. No new miracles to prove, no new storms to tame. The paradox surprised me most. The less I needed someone, the more I was worth meeting. Halfway through a Saturday espresso, I heard myself say, "I'm comfortable being on my own." The woman across the table smiled like that was a rare sentence. The climax wasn't chemistry, it was composure. Alone didn't feel like empty anymore. It felt like room for the right thing, if the right thing ever wanted in. One morning downtown, fate did that small-town trick it loves and put Rachel in the same coffee shop. She sat with a man in a suit that fit like a decision. She saw me, froze, then called my name with that careful kindness adults use when history is fresh. I walked over, said hello. "You look good," she said. "I'm glad you're okay." I nodded. "I am, really." There wasn't a script after that. No blame, no tour through the past, no tug on old wires. Just two people breathing the same air for a minute. The man at her table glanced over. I wished them both well, with my eyes if not my mouth, and stepped to the counter for a black coffee like always. The climax was the easing in my chest as I walked away. Closure didn't need a speech. It needed a hallway and a door that opens forward. I pushed mine and it swung easy. Outside, the day had that clear kind of blue that makes everything look freshly painted. My phone buzzed. "Carter, climbing tonight?" I didn't hover over the keyboard. "Absolutely," I typed, and meant every letter. I carried my coffee past the windows, caught my reflection in the glass, and didn't flinch at the man looking back. The street moved like it always does. Deliveries, dog walkers, school buses negotiating turns with patience you only learn by doing. I slipped into the flow, not running from anything, not chasing anything, just choosing. The past didn't deserve a backward glance. The present had a pulse I could feel in my feet. The climax was in the yes I gave to what builds me now, and the easy no to the rest. The episode didn't end on a cliff I might fall from. It ended on a ledge I'd earned, roped in with people who hold. Tomorrow had work waiting. Good. I've got hands for that. The next week, the stool stood on the bench like a finished sentence. 3 legs cleanly splayed, seat sanded to a satin you feel more than you see. My hands were gray with sawdust and glue squeeze out, fingerprints etched in work instead of worry. I set it on the floor, gave it a test sit, and felt the quiet click a man gets when something holds because he built it right. No audience, no speech, just a small smile that stayed. I wiped the surface with oil, watched the grain wake up, and heard the line I'd been circling finally say itself in plain English. Freedom is living without asking permission. That message didn't need a billboard. The stool carried it just fine. Useful, sturdy, honest. I signed the underside with a pencil, date, and initials, the way you mark a mile you don't plan to lose. The climax was that single anchored truth. My life works best when I'm the one holding the tools. Tools led to rhythm. Mornings belonged to iron and breath. Evenings to wood and pencil lines. In between, real work paid the bills. Carter kept me on time. Trevor kept me laughing. The shop kept me honest. I said yes to projects I could finish and no to chaos dressed like opportunity. The room in my head widened, and the man in my chest stopped apologizing for taking up space. Discipline didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like respect for the life I'm building. With every completed rep, every square cut, every decent meal at a table I wiped myself, something steady grew. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was present, I was consistent, I was enough. That realization walked taller than pride and spoke softer than ego. The climax climbed a notch higher on the inside ladder. I don't need a verdict or a witness. I don't need a stage. I don't need to be more. I am. On a quiet Sunday, I sat with coffee and let the reel run from start to now. 3 weeks wasn't long on a calendar, but it was an ocean when you swim it awake. I saw the whole curve, the word pause landing like a hammer on porcelain, the scramble to please that never came, the first straight bar path at the gym, the walnut coming to life under oil, the folder on the table, the door closing behind her boxes, the tribe at 6 a.m., the side business humming in small, clean victories. Fear had faded into calm, obligation into choice, noise into signal. I didn't romanticize any of it. I just told the truth to myself without blinking. Then I said the line out loud so it would stop being a thought and become a fact. She pressed pause on the marriage. I pressed play on my life. The twist wasn't angry, it was accurate. The story didn't end there. It finally started where I stand. Morning comes easy now. I run a hand over the stool's smooth seat, the grain warm under my fingertips, and take a slow sip of black coffee while the front door murmurs shut behind the quiet. No speeches, no verdicts. Just a house that fits, tools that wait, and a man who finally trusts his own two hands. I'm not angry. I'm not auditioning. I'm done asking for permission to breathe. If someone ever hit pause on you, made you small in your own life, write it down with me right here. Comment, I pressed play. Because that's the point, isn't it? Freedom is choosing today on purpose. Respect is keeping the promises you make to yourself. I've got lumber to cut, friends to meet at 6 a.m., and a life that keeps opening every time I show up. If this hit you where it needed to, tap subscribe, share this with a brother who needs the nudge, and stick around. This story isn't over. The next chapter starts when you pick up your tools.